In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talk when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Apparently, they're looking to clear some cap space, so which players would they be willing to part with? We have the latest on Jakob Chychrun in Arizona, one of the top players with term on his contract, expected to move before the deadline. Plus, could we see a significant trade between the New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins? We'll discuss how that might work. Plus, we have other news as well, including some news on Ontario's capacity limits for the Leafs and the Sens. We have news from the NHL waiver wire, some injury updates, and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First up, I want to take a minute and talk a little bit about the Draisaitl Jim Matheson interaction between the two recent Oilers media availability, where Draisaitl and Matheson really did not have a very pleasant exchange. And at the end of it here, Leon didn't answer Matheson's question, at least not the way that Matheson was hoping for, and he came out and said, "Why are you so pissy, Leon?" And it's kind of become the latest hot topic. Everybody's trying to use the word pissy to be funny. It's kind of evolved into this whole big thing, and really at the end of the day, obviously the Oilers' top players like McDavid and Draisaitl, we've heard a few others too, in media, are starting to get a little testy with each other. Frustrations boiling over. Many are wondering what Ken Holland is going to do. The answer continues to be that it looks like they're going to try to work themselves out of this with no trades being imminent, but you have to think that a goaltender trade of some sort has got to be coming somewhere. We talked a bit about yesterday about some possibilities. At the end of the day, though, as much as the frustration is there, I've heard a lot of different takes on how this exchange went down. And McDavid and Draisaitl, I think, as much as they probably don't want to have to answer those questions, they don't always have the answers. I can imagine how tough that is. But they have to understand that it comes with the territory, and being an elite player in the league, being a captain in the case of McDavid, especially in a Canadian market, like, you're going to be expected to be asked and answer the tough questions when the team's not going well. You're also out there, talking about things well when things are going your way as well. It goes both ways. I heard one take that I thought was a real good analogy. This comes from a former player, now analyst, Ray Ferraro, who of course works for TSN in Canada and does a lot of work for ESPN in the US as well. And Ray said, basically, when McDavid was being asked, now this was more about McDavid than Draisaitl, but Leon could have essentially done the same thing here. When he was asked about what went wrong, how did the game fall apart, referring to the Ottawa game last Saturday night when they obviously had a bad loss, and really that's when it started to really explode. And McDavid really should have said, at one point we had the lead, it was 3-1. They came back, got a couple quick ones, it was 3-3. He said, I really needed to be a little bit better myself. I really needed to make a play. I think if I could have pushed a little harder, done something a little different, could have helped us get a goal, settle things down, and we could have had a better outcome. Take some leadership, take some onus on yourself, and take the pressure off the rest of your teammates, because essentially they're kind of not really wanting to say much. They probably don't want to say what they really think, because they don't want to call out their teammates and come across like a real jerk and a bad teammate, right? Like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to come out and say, well, we couldn't get a big save from our goaltender when we needed it. Our D wasn't great. Like, you don't want to go there, and you feel like the reporter is trying to kind of go you into doing that, and right, so you kind of get a little defiant. So I understand where it's coming from, but they really need to, I think, just kind of take the pressure on themselves and kind of spin it the other way. So when Matheson asked Leon, what did he feel has been going wrong? What area do they need to work on? Originally, he said that basically a bit of everything, right? So he asked him if he wanted to expand and be more specific. And instead of giving him the answer he did, which wasn't much, he basically could have just said, we need to do everything a little bit better, including myself. Obviously, I'm relied upon for a lot of offense, and I could have done this or that a little bit better, and we're going to work our way out of this and try to be a little bit more positive. Take on some of the onus here that it's partly your responsibility too. I mean, I understand there's a big debate whether or not the Oilers need to change their game, and whether or not these guys need to play more of a 200-foot game and all that. And I don't think they need to change those guys. Leon and Connor McDavid are far from the problem. It's the supporting cast around him, and we've all known it for a long time. It's just that simple. They need to get more solid in goal. They need to be able to defend. But with these guys, the talents they have for the offensive side of the game, if I'm their coach, I really wouldn't care what they were able to do defensively. Do your thing. The rest of the cast can take care of the rest. And they haven't been holding up their end of the bargain lately either. So to me, I think they could have went a whole lot better. It doesn't help right now with COVID and a lot of restrictions that, these guys are not really able to kind of talk about things afterwards. The media are basically mostly done remotely through Zoom and stuff. So it's really not a good scene. You really like to see these guys have a bit of a better attitude. I can see it from the player perspective. I can also see it from the reporter's perspective. They're just doing their job, trying to ask the tough questions. And these players, I think, need to do themselves a little bit more of a favor. And instead of creating more of an enemy within the media, just kind of, maybe take some responsibility for it and be a good teammate, a good leader, and take the pressure off your teammates and try to, rally. Like, essentially, like, another thing that Ray said too is, like, he said Connor or Leon could have said, like, listen, if I had the answers, I'd be rushing to the dressing room and I would be talking to my teammates and outlining what the plan's going to be, but I don't, but all I can do is control what I do, and I'm going to do my best to be better and try to get this team on track and etc. and take some ownership of it instead of, kind of coming off like a big baby. Like, to me, that's kind of how Leon came across. I wasn't overly impressed. At the same time, with Matheson coming back saying, Leon, why are you so pissy? I wasn't impressed with that either. I think it was bad on both sides. It could have been a whole lot better, and hopefully we can avoid those type of exchanges. I know there is an entertainment factor for those that are non-partial to the situation, but really, it's just, to me, it's a bit of a bad look for the team and the players and the reporter as well. And we'll see where things go, but the Oilers have a bit of a tough schedule coming up. Things could get worse before they get better unless we see something drastic happen internally, a trade or something. So we'll see where things go in Edmonton, but I certainly wanted to give my take on the whole Draisaitl Matheson situation there. Now in Ontario, they got bad news today. We were expecting an announcement from Premier Rob Ford about some loosening of restrictions, but when it comes to events and professional hockey, they did not get the results and the numbers they were hoping for anywhere soon enough. They're going to be restricted to 500 fans per game until February the 21st. That's a long haul. And then after that, they're only allowed 50% at that point, and they're not expecting to go to 100% until right around March the 14th. And that March 14th date is not a hard, firm date. That's just an estimate. Now, of course, I'm sure the team and the league will be lobbying for changes for that all to come a little bit sooner. So that affects the Leafs and the Senators. Obviously, it'll affect the Raptors and the NBA too. I'm not sure if the capacity limits, obviously, will be the same thing for junior hockey and all the other lower level sports too. So it's bad all around. So we had a bunch of games postponed so that they could play later with fans, and now it's not even going to be a possibility for a big chunk of that. It's going to lose not only a lot of money to the team, but think of all the workers, because all the concessions are shut down in there as well. There's a lot of, it's not all full-time work, but there's a lot of people that work in the arena for games that are not going to be working there, so it affects a lot of other people too. But the Leafs make like around $3 million a game. The Sens are far less than that, under $1 million a game. But still, like, that's a lot of money for an extended period of time when they've already gone through a big chunk of this before. So it's not good news, and we'll see if the teams in the NHL with their assistants can lobby to get any changes. But that was not good news today at all. Quick note on the waiver wire. The players that were on waivers yesterday, which was Hetherington from the Senators and White with the Devils, they both cleared. There were no claims today. Both players, I believe, have been assigned to their team's taxi squads, and we'll see if there's any additional waiver movement here in the next few days. But that was all for the time being. A few other quick updates on some injuries. The Sabres get bad news on a couple more players, including another goalie. Malcolm Subban appears to likely be done for the season. Apparently he had to have surgery. They're listing him as month to month, but they said there's a good chance that he won't make it back. And of course, Craig Anderson, who was signed as basically retired, came out of retirement as a free agent, signed with Buffalo, kind of basically as an emergency after they lost Allmark to Boston. They didn't really have much in terms of goaltending under contract. So they signed Aaron Dell and Craig Anderson. Anderson was off to a good start to help the team have a good start to the year. Then he got hurt, and he's been out month to month for some time, and there's no real clear-cut answer if he's going to be able to make it back either. Goalies have not had a good time in Buffalo this year, and defenseman Colin Miller as well also had surgery and is going to be out for about 6 weeks. That's also not great news for a player. I'm sure the Sabres were hoping to likely move at the deadline and recoup some assets. Obviously, Colin Miller would have been a good piece with, an expiring contract that might have been appealing to teams. Right shot guy, can play power plays, got a good shot. Nobody you really want to have playing a ton of minutes, but you can put him in a third pair role to get a chance on the second power play and things like that. Have some extra depth back there. Good experience. Would have been a great pickup. And now it's debatable if that's going to be doable. I mean, theoretically, it is, realistic here that he could very well, still get moved. It's just going to be challenging where teams aren't going to really get much of a chance to see him. Putting him out 6 weeks from now, obviously, gets him back pretty close to the deadline. He won't have a chance to play a whole lot. So if anything, he still might get moved, but it's likely going to impact his return in value to the Sabres, considering the amount of time he's going to end up missing with that surgery. So we'll see where that goes for the Buffalo Sabres. Now on to the NHL trade rumors for today. First up, we have some updates on Jakob Chychrun, who is, arguably the top player in the rumor mill who could be moved, especially if you consider the fact that a lot of the players that we're talking about are pending UFAs, or players that are not expected to go back to their old teams, right? That's usually the most of the players that get moved. It's not often you see a player with term, or at least a lot of term, get traded. And then even then, a player that's young and able to be a top pair guy, like, it's just not a common occurrence in the NHL. And now we're hearing, obviously, some different teams that might be in the mix, but we've heard a lot about Chychrun when it comes to Anaheim, LA, St. Louis. We've heard Boston to a degree was in there. Carolina's been on everybody. The Avalanche to a degree. And it doesn't mean that they all have different levels of seriousness, but one team to throw into the mix as well, who's having a real solid year and most likely do add a defenseman, is the Panthers. The Florida Panthers very well could take a swing here at Chychrun, and Jeff Merrick, in his recent article here on his latest blog called Rink Fries on Sportsnet, speculates that it could take, and he actually also mentioned this on his recent podcast too, so it's been mentioned by him a couple times, that he felt if the Panthers were to make a pitch for Jakob Chychrun, it could take a first round pick and Spencer Knight and Anton Lundell. Possibly all three of those assets. Now, of course, we know that the asking price for Chychrun is high. It appears they have even gone up from when it first hit the rumor mill. But three assets are likely what Arizona is looking for, with a first round pick being one of them, a solid young player, and a solid prospect. So obviously, now Knight and Lundell either of them haven't played a lot. I mean, you can maybe switch out one of them for, let's say, Owen Tippett. That's a possibility I could see, but will that get it done? I mean, Owen Tippett's obviously a little bit more mature than either of those guys, been drafted for a few extra years, had more time to develop, but he's also kind of struggling a little bit this year and not getting those consistent goal-scoring totals like we thought he would when he was first drafted. I mean, Tippett's a pure shooter, a guy who's expected to be, maybe 20, 25, 30 goal guy on a fairly consistent basis. I understand he's still young. He may still get there, but he's been having a hard time reaching that full potential so far during his time in the NHL with the Florida Panthers. So obviously, that might be a swap, but still, to have three pieces like that, can you imagine giving up Knight and Lundell along with a first? To me, that's way too much. I understand Bobrovsky's been playing phenomenal this year, which is great for them. He still has a long-term contract too. So, as much as trading Spencer Knight might sound crazy, at some point, and I don't know if now would really be the realistic time, but at some point, you may have to consider that. Because the Bobrovsky contract is going to be pretty much impossible to trade given how much money it is, and if he keeps playing the way he is, they're not going to want to trade him anyway. And at some point here, if Knight develops like we're expecting, he's likely going to want to be a starter, and he's not going to get it there for a period of time. At least it's possible. I mean, you just never know, right? If old Bobrovsky that first came to Florida shows up again, then they're going to need Knight. It's really difficult to say, but Bobrovsky's found his game. He's playing super good right now, so would they consider that? I would hope that they would really take a long, hard, thought process and say, maybe that's just too much. I think personally, as much as I'm a fan of Jakob Chychrun, I almost think that somebody is going to overpay for this guy and within a short time regret it. I do think he has first pair potential, but I think in a lot of teams outside of Arizona, he's going to be more of a second pair guy. Still play 20 plus minutes a night though. He can still play in a variety of situations. He can still be very physical. Like, there's lots to like about him as a guy. Chychrun as a player, great contract for what he can bring you as well. But to give up some pretty solid assets like that, I don't know. Like, it seems like an awfully hefty price tag. So if you're the Florida Panthers, would you consider that? Or is that way too much? And do you think Chychrun's going to actually end up demanding that kind of a price tag in a trade that Merrick is suggesting here? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Now, also, I want to look at the Maple Leafs. Dave Pagnotta of thefourthperiod.com and Elliot Friedman have both made it known in their recent commentaries and blogs that the Leafs want to create some cap space so that they can have more options for deadline additions. So, of course, to create cap space, players have to be moved out, and you got to have other assets coming back like draft picks or prospects or other things that are not going to immediately impact your salary cap situation. So certainly, Friedman didn't really get into details onto which players he thought might go, or if there was any rumors about, conversations that were taking place or anything of that nature. However, Pagnotta did make note that he felt Nick Ritchie and Travis Dermott were the most likely scenario. Of course, we've seen the Maple Leafs make a habit recently of building up early leads and blowing it. 3-1, 4-1 leads. The worst lead in hockey if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've got nightmares about some other leads that I won't need to go into. I'm sure Leaf fans know what I'm referring to back in some playoff games when the same thing has happened. This is not something that can be reoccurring. They have to figure it out and move past it. And in their most recent loss here to the Rangers, Sheldon Keefe, the head coach of the Maple Leafs, came out and called out his team and called them soft. And that, to me, is like the ultimate insult. Like, as a hockey player, you don't want to be called that. You want to be called just about anything. Even if you know your game wasn't good last night or tonight and you're listening to commentary about people talking about how you played, you don't want to hear soft. It's like almost the ultimate insult. And I'm sure Keefe is probably coming from a good place, thinking he's going to hopefully motivate his guys to play a little harder and be tougher to play against. They're missing Jake Muzzin right now, who certainly provides a lot of that sandpaper on the back end. And where he's dealing with a concussion, you have to think they might be concerned. What if he's out longer than we're hoping for? Right now, they said he could be out for about a week. But we all know concussions are incredibly unpredictable. And if that drags on longer and he's out for a more significant period of time, that's going to be a big blow. Now, the other thing with Muzzin is that he's had a history of injuries. The injuries have been piling up more and more each year, including in the playoffs when they need him the most. He's a big part of their team. He's a big piece back there. But if he continues to get hurt, and he's not there, then that's not good, right? So they, to acquire another defenseman who can play a similar style and almost have like Jake Muzzin 2.0 or very comparable D to him would be a very, very wise idea. It doesn't have to be a rental. It could be a player return if it's the right price, but a rental is certainly a possibility. I wouldn't rule out that. One guy that comes to mind is like a Josh Manson in Anaheim, but we don't know what Anaheim's plans are yet. We haven't really talked much about Ducks players in the rumor mill because the Ducks have had a better season than many expected, but they do have a bunch of expiring contracts. I can't see the Ducks going to the deadline and not selling off at least a couple players. I mean, they've got Lindholm, they got Manson, they got Getzlaf, Raquel. Some of these guys are going to move. It's just a given, and I think we're going to see the Ducks regress a bit in the second half. I'm not convinced yet that they're going to be a playoff team, so things could change there. But that's not a name that's been linked to the Leafs. He has been before, but not for a while, as Manson. But, that's just somebody I mentioned as the kind of fits the bill. Short-term contract, expiring deal, not making a ton of money, big on the size front, can play physical, could certainly do a lot of the things that Muzzin does too. So it might be something that they take a look at. But Ritchie and Dermott being your main players. Now, right now, Ritchie's gone through waivers and cleared. He's listed on the taxi squad. So they're burying part of his contract. But the problem here is that the taxi squads are supposed to go away after the All-Star break which means ultimately that they're not going to get as much flexibility with putting players there, right? So certainly he could go to the minors. That's a possibility too. Not going to get any extra cap hit, but if they can move him completely, then they get the full cap hit gone. It helps. Now, Dermott's not making a ton of money, but of all the defensemen, he's probably the most likely to go. But you can make an argument Justin Hall might be that guy too. But the problem here too is that the Leafs have had their fair share of injuries back there, and I don't think that we're necessarily going to see anything right away. I think Dubas is going to tread lightly here and proceed with caution. He's not trading a D unless another one's coming back. That's a given. They can't go further into deficit here with less D on the roster. But those are the most likely guys. I wouldn't completely rule out, even though he wasn't mentioned here, Pierre Engvall being in that mix too. I think there's a possibility he could be moved, mainly because of his contract, if the right player is coming back. But we'll see. The Leafs need space. They need to add more grit on the blue line to be tougher to play against. They certainly don't want Sheldon Keefe calling them soft anymore, and they need to show that they can not be that and be tougher to play against and not just be offensive guys that are not willing to take the body and kind of lay it on the line like you need to this time of the year. Now, lastly here, I want to look at a potential deal between the Bruins and the Rangers, as mentioned by Jeff Merrick in his Rink Fries blog that I referenced earlier on the other conversation around Jacob Chychrun. Now, he mentions on one of his notes here, because today's blog basically was talking about a lot of the players he felt would be most likely to be traded by the deadline, and one of them is Jake DeBrusk and Philip Hedl, and he wonders if there's a fit there between the Rangers and the Bruins to make it happen. Now, a lot of times I find what Merrick says, I think he often knows a little bit more, so I have to wonder if maybe there's more details there on actual conversations taking place, even though that's not confirmed. But clearly, Jake DeBrusk and Philip Hedl, I don't know that it would be a one-for-one swap, to be honest. I mean, Jake DeBrusk is a little bit older. He's 25 years old, a first-round pick in 2015. He's played 275 games and put up 146 points, whereas Philip Hedl's 22, a 2017 first-round pick, so he's 3 years younger, 2 draft years, well, actually about 2.5 years based on birthday, 222 games played and 82 points. I mean, Hedl has struggled to find consistency. I'm not convinced that the Rangers would not consider moving him. They throw in a guy like Vitaly Kravtsov as well, who also had requested a trade. They have some trade currency there to maybe do a swap. We've been hearing all season since the injury to Sammy Blais that they are likely going to bring in somebody who can play top 6 minutes in the forward group, likely on the left side as well, or right wing. It has definitely going to be a winger. So DeBrusk could fit that. I mean, DeBrusk could try to play on the right side, and that didn't work out in Boston, so he'd likely have to play on the left, which I think they can probably accomplish. But the problem is they have like Lafreniere, they have Kreider. They'd have to move their lines around, but Lafreniere's not consistently in the top 6 either. So either way, I personally think DeBrusk has more value than Hedl does. Now, we've heard the Bruins apparently looking for a young player in return, somebody who's just as valuable. And Hedl, being younger and having a lot of potential, I think would interest them. But personally, I think the Rangers would have to throw in probably a pick on top of that. I think we're looking at Hedl and a second or third round pick for DeBrusk, because DeBrusk is more accomplished. He has a 27-goal season under his belt. Hedl does not have that, but like I said, given the fact he's younger, maybe they'll see that. I mean, where Merrick's wondering if this is a possibility, I can see it. I mean, we've seen the Bruins actually linked in a lot of stuff here in the last day or two. All kinds of rumors about Boston. One of them, which we'll probably talk a bit more about tomorrow, was even the possibility of trading goalie Jeremy Swayman to the Oilers. I mean, I could not believe people were talking about that. And that's not even so much, I don't think, a rumor, is more of a proposal that it seems to be getting everybody talking. I'm like, I don't see that. I mean, the Bruins got themselves, spanked the other night by the Carolina Hurricanes. Rask got pulled. You can't blame it all on him, but at this point, I don't think they can really go all in on him either. I think they need to be cautious here, right? Very cautious. I understand the argument about going for a Stanley Cup, but wow, like that's you got to proceed with caution when you talk about trading your future star goaltender, just like the Panthers and Spencer Knight. Like I said, you got Bobrovsky playing awesome now, but is that going to last? Like, you just don't know. Anyways, all kinds of rumors. The rumor mill is really heating up all kinds of new stuff coming out every day with potential stuff we might see as we approach the deadline. We're not too far from the All-Star break, so I do think as we get closer, we're going to see teams come out of that All-Star break and likely start to really do a few things to shake things up here as they get ready for the playoffs. So let me know your thoughts on anything discussed down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.